Cat got your tongue?
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Greetings and salutations, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, V Infuso. And I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, V, is this really necessary? Making a video on the 2004 Catwoman? Everyone knows it's awful. Well, yes, it is a necessity because A, I intend on covering every DC movie ever made here on this channel, but much more importantly, B, I've actually never seen this movie before. At least before today. So this gave me a reason to finally subject myself to it. And man, did I regret that decision. 14 minutes in and I had 4 pages of notes. This movie is, it's something. It's something, not something good, but something. First and foremost, if you're familiar with the brand, you will be unfamiliar with everything in this movie. Despite this being a Batman IP character, it has very little to do with Batman. As a matter of fact, The Dark Knight doesn't so much as get a passing mention in the runtime. Nor does Gotham City. There is almost nothing that links this movie or the Catwoman character to her actual comic book counterpart, or anyone she's ever shared a panel with. As a matter of fact, this Catwoman isn't even really Catwoman. At least not the one that you're thinking of. You see, this isn't Selina Kyle. This is Patience Phillips. It really makes you wonder who this was for. It's a movie with an already established fandom, but it's not doing even the most minimal of fan service. I'm not even talking about all the extras. This movie doesn't even give you the basics. There is next to no aspect from the comics or cartoons. No famous and iconic characters for this Catwoman to share the screen with. Everything about this movie, aside from the name Catwoman, is completely original to the story itself. Well, sort of. Because as it turns out, there really isn't a whole lot that's original to this Catwoman at all. I think the most egregious aspect of this movie isn't it even existing in its own name, but the fact that it felt the need to try to drag an entirely different mythos into it. As I've stated before in another video, this movie is Batman 89 adjacent. It wants to coast off the coattails of the Tim Burton Batman movies, despite having absolutely nothing to do with that line of films. Now, at face value, you may find yourself confused by that statement. How could these two continuities ever be mistaken for being one and the same? They're so tonally different and, quite frankly, contrast to a conflicting level. Well, it's very simple. Halle Berry's Catwoman transformation scene is almost identical to Michelle Pfeiffer's. Similar situations behind them as well. An employee stumbles upon their boss's secret shenanigans, which could threaten the prosperity of the business. This causes the evil corporate main antagonist to fire their employee from life. Our Catwoman falls to her tragic demise only to be reborn by the breath of local stray cats. Because both Catwomen are quite literally cat ladies. The two scenes match up pretty well, and to say that they took inspiration from the Catwoman creation in Batman Returns would be a little bit of an unjust understatement. This is the movie literally attempting to recreate that moment in its film. If you're not familiar with the Catwoman character, I'd forgive you for thinking, well, it's all Catwoman, right? That's her origin story, V. What are you talking? Except it's not. This was the specific story invented for the second Batman movie. It has never been a part of this baddie's backstory aside from the Tim Burton flick and this one off. The character also doesn't have powers in most iterations, unless she's explicitly made a metahuman, but really that's a rarity. It's clear that for this film, Burton's story was used as a blueprint. The movie takes this a step further by having Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman appear in a pile of pictures of past femme fatales, establishing some sort of Catwoman legacy. It's more than just a little suggestive about its continuity, it's almost as if it's overly insisted upon it. But you know, in private. It's very evident that Catwoman tried to secretly sequelize Batman Returns. But that's not even where attempting to capitalize on that other Catwoman stops. As I said before, this isn't Selina Kyle, though she is meant to be her stand-in. I guess you could call her predecessor a jumping off point. Catwoman took the character created specifically for the Tim Burton Batman movies and exaggerated her to campy and comic levels. And I mean that in terms of both sides of the character. Halle Berry plays Patience Phillips, who for all intents and purposes is just Selena Kyle from the Burton film. She's the shy, strange type, a social alien and a complete stranger to, well, normality. Problem is, she doesn't play the character with the same believability that Michelle Pfeiffer had. I don't know that I can blame Halle Berry herself for that, because that seems more of an issue with the script. But the wardrobe department should also be blamed, because we're supposed to see Patience as being a mess prior to her Catwomanization, and she's not. She looks fine. There's nothing wrong with this woman. Even if the main villains spend the whole 3 minutes roasting her in their office, I'm sorry, you're not convincing me that Halle Berry is unattractive. It's not happening. I mean, you also didn't convince me that Michelle Pfeiffer was unattractive, but it did feel like you were trying. This just feels like a tired remaster. The part was already perfected, so approaching the character in the same exact manner was always going to make this rendition feel second-rate. To make matters even worse, the movie seems confused about the character's identity. In Batman Returns, we saw the duality of Selena. We saw her two personalities conflict and contrast. But she never felt like she was two separate people. She was one person split down the middle. This movie insists that Catwoman lives independently of Patience, that they are two completely different entities that just so happen to inhabit the same body. It's kind of like Diet Eddie Brock. But when this movie isn't shamelessly ruining the recreation, it's adding new aspects to the mythos that are just as bad, if not even worse. Like making Catwoman into an actual cat person. Like, I get it. Selena literally groomed herself in public, and that was a little bit much, to be fair. But she wasn't like spitting up hairballs and hissing at dogs or sniffing catnip. There have been a few Catwomen who purred as they spoke, and sometimes it works. But sometimes it doesn't. I think it's a real read the room situation. If you're trying your hand at a more serious adaptation of the antagonist, that should probably be left on the cutting room floor unless it's being used ironically or in parody. Here, they just use it. She just purrs as she speaks sometimes. Look, it may have worked for Eartha Kitt. It does not work for Halle Berry. Again, read the room. They have her eat tuna straight out of the can, climbing on furniture on all fours, going to bars and ordering milk. Like, come on. Even if you knew nothing about the actual comic, canon, or character, good sense alone should be enough to tell you that this isn't good. This is taking the whole cat persona beyond a bit too far. I want you to know that Halle Berry got paid $14 million for this movie, and you know what? For the torture that woman had to endure, she earned it. Good for her. You know what's wild, though? This is a controversial opinion, but I'm gonna say it. I don't blame Halle Berry. I don't. Truly, I don't. As a matter of fact, I still to this day think Halle Berry could have been a damn good Catwoman had she had better material to work with. Had she not been asked to play a discount version of Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Had she been allowed to play actual Catwoman. She probably could have been good. But here, she is not. So that's what we're talking about today, unfortunately. This has to be one of the biggest cases of right person, right part, wrong movie to play the part in. She isn't entirely incapable of feeling like the character. As a matter of fact, there are moments where she feels quite on brand as the character. The problem is that these moments are few and far between. And the in-between is some of the cringiest attempts at witty dialogue and flirtatious failures that I've ever seen. This movie really wants the audience to know that Catwoman is sexy. Unfortunately, more often than not, she just comes off as silly. Like, no one in editing could have at least saw this and realized, hey, maybe this shouldn't make the final cut. A lot of the time in Catwoman comics, movies, or TV shows, the character toes the line between face and heel. She's neither hero nor villain, she's now an anti-hero. Which basically means that she's a good guy that does some pretty bad things. Essentially, that's the essence of the character. But this movie seems to have a different take. The character is in fact in nature heroic, but is wrongly perceived as being villainous. I don't really love that development, but it's one that I could potentially get behind had it been better executed. That's not my Catwoman per se, but there could be a good Catwoman story to be told there. Not here though. This Catwoman suit really just looks like baby's first BDSM. It's the most tame thing you'd ever see at a fetish club. But it's also surprisingly spicy for 2004 Hollywood. It's not a great look, but I can tell that someone really thought it was. You ever see something so bad that you don't even know how to respond? That's what I'm going through right now. It's just all so awful, I don't know where to begin. I can totally understand how such a concept would come up in the planning stages, but the fact that this made it this far along to the final product is honestly nothing short of crazy. The newer elements this movie introduces are boring and bland. None of it mattered, and nobody cares. Catwoman is given a crazy cat lady guru who knows everything about cats and Catwomen. I don't even know how to describe this character because what you're imagining from that brief description is probably entirely accurate. She is exactly what you're thinking right now. She checks off the boxes of every wise mentor you've seen in movies and every crazy cat lady you've seen in real life. She is both. And while the actress is wonderful, this part is not. Just like everyone else in this movie, she looks like a total goof. I really want to talk about her more, but there isn't that much more to say. Only thing worth noting is that if I had a nickel for every Batman-related movie about a standalone villain that this woman was in, I would have 2 nickels. Now that's not really a lot, but it's kind of weird that it happened twice. She went from Catwoman's Obi-Wan to the clown queen of crime as Joker's mother. There's also a romantic subplot with Catwoman and a cop, which to be fair feels on brand for Catwoman everywhere. They always want what they shouldn't want, whether that be jewelry that they don't own or can't afford, or some sort of justice seeker. Enter Detective Tom Lone. He's alright. He's likable. Relatively charming guy. But doesn't really make the impression on the audience that he makes on Patience. Again, I don't think the actor is necessarily bad, but the movie is poorly written and he's ultimately yet another unneeded addition to the plot. This guy is honestly just pseudo Bruce Wayne. He's the good guy falling for the bad girl, and now has to decide whether to serve her justice or pancakes in the morning. This isn't a stand-in for Batman, but it kinda is. They're following the same formula. It's very clear that they're trying to take everything that they know that's been successful about the brand and then redo it, but significantly shittier. I wouldn't call him Batman, but I will say that their relationship is an obvious attempt and fail at recapturing the Batman-Catwoman dynamic. I get what they were thinking when constructing this, but in execution, it's always just gonna come off as a cheap duplicate. It's a paper-thin retelling of that classic romance with none of the complexities or any of the chemistry. But I will tell you this, that basketball scene between the two, that was something else. Someone saw the one fight/flirtation at a public park in Daredevil and thought, oh, that's what this movie needs. Let's do that, but worse. The content of the scene, the angles, the edits, the music, it's like an assault on all of your senses and movie making all at the same time. I hate to repeat myself, but I really don't have the ability to articulate the awful that I was seeing. I could show you a couple of clips from the clip, but honestly, it doesn't do this injustice justice. I don't know if this movie is the worst movie I've ever seen, but this scene is absolutely the worst scene that I've ever seen. The other characters, the few that are really less characters and more props for Patience to interact with, I don't know any of their names. You got Alex Borstein, who is kind of entertaining, at least in comparison to everything else going on. Normally, a character of this magnitude in a superhero flick would probably be forgettable and just not substantial. But the bar has been lowered so much that she is the absolute highlight. I kid you not. The main villains of this female-led superhero flick are the heads of a makeup company, the evil beauty product organization. And look, I don't want to be that guy. I'm legitimately not trying to be social justice-y, but real talk. Does that not sound like the most pandering plot you've ever heard? The superheroine has to go toe-to-toe with the evil beauty product organization? Are you kidding me? That's like if Batman went head-to-head with a monster truck driven by G.I. Joe, and it also turns into a Transformer. Now listen, there are going to be some of you who go, V, that's not pandering, and that's fine, but I also guarantee almost none of you would argue that it's compelling, that this is a plot that you'd want to see play out. Oh man, gotta see how Catwoman versus random Sephora clerk is going to go. No, of course not. This isn't entertaining. It's a waste of $100 million. And no, you didn't mishear me. This movie was made for $100 million. In 2004, a budget this movie wouldn't make back at the box office, grossing just about $82 million. George and Laurel, the movie's dynamic duo, are so terrible it's tuning. They're just the worst people who ever existed. They're incredibly mean-spirited to a ridiculous degree. In real life, awful people usually at least attempt to not seem like they're awful. But these people are just letting their villain flag fly. George is a billionaire womanizer who treats women like they're fast cars, always looking for the newest model. And in looking for a model, he finds both the new face of his brand and also a new side piece. Laurel, as you can imagine, isn't fond of this, finding out that she's not the apple of her husband's eye or the fashion figurehead. So naturally, she has him killed and frames Catwoman for it. Oh, and also, the makeup that they sell deteriorates your face if you stop using it, but it makes your skin as strong as marble if you don't. Sharon Stone makes for a good villain, but not in this movie. She plays the most generic bad guy I think I've ever seen. She tries for menacing, but she really just ends up meandering. Just moving along with the plot, but not really making an impact on the actual movie. She's integral to the story, but I still could have done without her. Evil fashionista with marble makeup skin doesn't scream Catwoman to me. I don't know if I'd even commit it to paper, let alone let it play out on film. She's just so generic and undescriptive, and I'm realizing I'm having the same problem with every point in this movie. It's basic. This whole movie feels like it was made with a connect-the-dots superhero script. It seems like this movie has a story to tell, but I really question if it was worth telling. The plot is paper-thin, and the actual product is just as shallow as the corrupt corporation it portrays. It's a movie that's made more comical by how serious the material is trying to take itself. And the acting is really bad. It's all pretty hokey, even in the moments it's not trying to be. But then again, this material isn't exactly deeply engaging. How could you blame the actors when the script calls for you to rub catnip on your face playfully? Or when you're asked to react in fear of CGI seagulls and 3D spiders? It's like they were going out of their way to make Halle Berry look foolish. The movie is absolutely a product of its time. The music choices, the opening credits, the ironic use of the phrase, "I will never do this," only to have the character inevitably go and do that? Early 2000s is in the air. And it's toxic for a healthy going movie experience, so put your masks on. The camera angles in this movie are really wonky. It's like the director dropped out of filmmaking school early because he's the wild card who doesn't follow any of the rules of cinema. But guy, maybe you should. There are certain rules for a reason, and breaking them just causes general dysfunction and an unpleasant movie-going experience. Not only are all these angles and cuts unnecessary, but they go by in such rapid succession it almost gives me secondhand whiplash. The way the cameras alter, it kinda damages the perspective of where everything and everyone in the shot is. The piss-poor Photoshop work of 2004 has its paw prints all over the product. You can see it everywhere. And man, I don't remember what fake pictures looked like in 2004, but I gotta think that they could have done a little bit better than this. Were we really that early in that advancement? There's some pretty cool looking shots in passing on occasion, but they're on very, very rare occasion. That's the only positive I have. Catwoman is not just a bad Catwoman movie, it's a bad comic book movie. And it's not just a bad comic book movie, but it's just all over a bad movie. The Batman brand has never sunk any lower, and he wasn't even a part of this. But here's something really crazy to think about, and this is what I want to leave you with. When you're thinking back to comic book movies and how they've evolved over the years, I want you to remember that Catwoman only came out 4 years before Iron Man hit the theaters, and only 1 year before Batman Begins made its way to the big screen. How far we made it in such a limited amount of time. So that was Catwoman, that was awful, and I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. If you like this video, if you want to see more Batman film-related content, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
"Not so mighty now, are you, Catwoman?"
I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.